Except for the 1998 Six-Day War in Abkhazia, the truces were largely honored. For now, Georgians cut their losses. Like every other post-Soviet nation, it was struck with economic uncertainty and had to find its place in the new world order. However, in doing so, the Georgians flew too close to the sun. While the ex-Soviet chairman Eduard Shevardnadze was in many ways a controversial figure in Georgian politics, he was also somewhat pro-East, but his autocratic Soviet-style leadership, corruption, mismanagement, and election fraud saw him also during the non-violent Rose Revolution. He would be replaced by Mikhail Saakashvili, who actually delivered. He was able to improve the country's economy and launch a new anti-corruption campaign that plagued his nation. He was able to raise the country's rating by the World Bank from 122nd to 18th by expanding the banking sector by 40%, increasing foreign investment to 3 billion, and thus maintaining an annual growth of 9.5%. After decades of stagnation, things were finally going upwards for the small country. Aside from all the points, Saakashvili was also flirting with NATO and the European Union, which has always been an absolute no-go for Russians in their backyard. But like many post-Soviet nations that got involved with the West, not just in terms of business, but also in terms of political affiliation, this was in fact a deal with the devil. Somehow a lot of American NGOs were present during the election, who educated, funded and pushed Georgian people towards the Rose Revolution. One of them was the Open Society Foundation from the notorious billionaire George Soros. Accusations have been made that Soros spent 42 million ramping up for the overthrow of Shevardnadze. Ironically, the same patterns were recognized in the Bulldozer Revolution that happened 3 years prior, and which ended the presidency of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia.
On the outskirts of New Belgrade, among communist-era tower blocks, lies the anonymous-looking office of Canvas. Inside, Sergej Popovic runs a school of revolution.
Our original idea was to help groups from Zimbabwe and Belarus in 2003 because they were inspired by the Serbian Revolution. And it started as a hobby, actually. It wasn't a full-time job. And then throughout the time, the more requests were coming, the more groups were inspired. The curriculum became more serious.
Popovic was a leader of the student group Otpor. It played a key role in the 2000 revolt that ousted President Milosevic. The tactics he learned at that time are now being taught to opposition groups around the world.
We worked with 37 countries after the Serbian Revolution. We had a successful 5 revolutions now before Middle East. And this is Georgia, Ukraine, Lebanon, Maldives, and now Egypt and Tunisia. And the list will grow longer. And then at the end, we don't have an idea in how many countries the clenched fist of Otpor was used.
For some reason, those so-called color revolutions happen everywhere where the West enters. Must be a coincidence.
The key actors in Otpor went on to create Canvas, as you mentioned, and operate in some 50 countries. They are simply following an agenda given them by people in Washington for regime change. They're using this deniability that they're simply idealistic young people from Serbia who did it successfully and are so happy about it they want to show the rest of the world. That's hardly a plausible explanation in my view. I think they're getting well financed by American intelligence services for doing this. And the target countries they target, like Egypt and most recently, and so are precisely the countries that are on the Pentagon agenda for destabilization and regime change.
I know power playing is a disgusting practice, but I don't make the rules, so don't blame me. There's Mikhail Saakashvili, who also promised to eventually restore the territorial integrity of his Rodina, was busy flirting with the West. Putin was not just twiddling his thumbs. He prepared the case for combat, as war seemed inevitable. Suddenly, Russian passports were handed out to Ossetians and Abkhazians. This policy laid the foundation for Russia's future claim to these territories. In 2006, after 4 suspected spies were deported, Russia began a full-scale diplomatic and economic war against Georgia, followed by the persecution of ethnic Georgians living in Russia. Also in 2006, a gas pipeline exploded that supplied Georgia with gas, or was supplied with gas at that point. Saakashvili, on the other hand, said in his speech, also in 2006, that the Russians are a barbarous tribe of Huns. The stroke that broke the camel's back, however, was when Georgia officially applied for NATO membership. Ironically, there was just one way to stop it, because NATO has strong resentments with applicants who are currently at war. As for now, Russia went full in. The Russian media complex is disgustingly good at fabricating and distributing stories and accusations, and so the blame game started on both sides. In April 2008, a Georgian UAV was shot down. Also, Georgia was apparently assembling 1,500 men in the Kogi Valley in preparation for an invasion of Abkhazia, which was the justification for the rise of numbers of Russian peacekeepers. Russia also fixed the railroads that linked Abkhazia, through which they transported more than 9,000 men. Additionally, during the war, military exercises were held in Russia, and a joint US-Georgian training was held at the same time, with the only difference being that the Russians stayed at the border. In early July, when conditions in South Ossetia aggravated as well, South Ossetians and Georgians bombed and kidnapped each other. On the 1st of August, an IED detonated and wounded 5 Georgian police officers in Tbilisi, South Ossetia. Georgian snipers responded with fire, killing 4 and wounding 7. Grenades were exchanged, and multiple casualties were reported on both sides. It was dubbed the worst outbreak of violence since 2004, and the events just kept spiraling out of control. 20,000 Ossetian civilians were evacuated, while hundreds of volunteers arrived. Georgians deployed heavy artillery. The Ossetians kept shelling and provoking until the Georgian artillery decided to shoot back. At first with a smoke barrage to give civilians enough time to leave Tbilisi, followed by a heavy bombardment of military positions, before they entered the capital city with boots on the ground. This was, of course, unacceptable to Russia, and now they had their justification for an assault. Russian heavy armored columns went through the Roki tunnel and challenged the Georgian invasion. A ceasefire was unilaterally announced on the 10th of August by Georgian authorities, who stated an aim to pull Georgian troops out of South Ossetia. But Russia did not embrace this truce offer and instead decided to bomb, or should I rather say, punish, the Georgians for flirting with NATO. Since the start of hostilities, Georgia must have felt like hell, since the whole Russian firepower came crashing down on this little country. Military bases, railroads, pipelines, governmental buildings, infrastructure, simply everything vital was left in shambles within just a couple of days. Even if the Georgians wanted to, they simply weren't able to pull up a fight, a proper fight, before being blown to pieces. From South Ossetia and Abkhazia, the Russians were advancing left and right, with little to no resistance, until they decided that that was enough. On the 12th of August, Russian President Medvedev announced the end of a peace enforcement operation in Georgia and signed an official peace agreement on the 16th. Within not even 2 weeks, the conflict was decided. The Russians and their allies reported 170 killed and 354 wounded. Georgia had 170 killed and 1,174 wounded. Georgia had to seize large parts of their territory for South Ossetia and the Kori Valley for Abkhazia. 20,000 Georgians that lived in their territory are still internally displaced, because they are not allowed to return. Russia now officially recognizes Abkhazia and South Ossetia as official states and integrated them into the federation, including a permanent Russian military presence in those regions. Occasionally, skirmishes have been recorded, but there's no doubt that Georgia focuses on a more peaceful political solution rather than another military intervention. As for our hero, the absolute incorruptible, upstanding, patriotic Mikhail Saakashvili, he himself would become an autocratic leader who ruled his country with an iron fist, that cracked down mass protest, and who apparently accepted bribes left and right. He almost brought his country back into another civil war, but fortunately he was voted out before that. After his presidency, he was charged with countless crimes, but he left the country before the prosecution could catch him. He became governor of Odessa in Ukraine, gave up his Georgian citizenship for that position, but was prosecuted again for corruption, but this time also stripped of his Ukrainian citizenship and deported to Poland. At this stage, he was essentially stateless. In 2021, he returned to his home country Georgia, where he was also charged with illegal border crossing as an ex-president of that country that he used to rule. Let that sink in. At this point, I'm not sure if I should be impressed or despised. His track record is outstanding, which just leaves the question, was it all worth it? Alright guys, that's it for the video. If you have any questions, then let me know in the comments. Also leave a like and a sub if you think that I have earned it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.